The pen was halfway to the signature line on the $8 billion IPO contract when my phone lit up on the polished mahogany table. I should have ignored it. 20 of the most powerful venture capitalists and investment bankers in Silicon Valley were staring at me across the Salesforce Tower conference room, their $600 fountain pens poised, their expectations palpable. This was the moment I had worked toward for 5 years, the moment that would make me one of the youngest self-made female billionaires in history, the moment that would put Avalon Digital on the map as the most successful tech IPO of the decade. But something made me glance at the screen. Instinct. The same sixth sense that had kept me alive in Silicon Valley's cutthroat world. I looked. The message from Robert Vance, my father, was 2 lines that detonated in my chest like a grenade. The entire trust fund is gone. You're screwed. Don't expect anything from me anymore. Time stopped. My vision tunneled. My ears rang. Every nerve in my body fired at once, screaming that I had just been hit by something catastrophic, something that should have brought me to my knees. But my hand didn't shake, not even a tremor. My breathing stayed even. My face kept that same confident smile I had worn walking into this room. Those 20 executives across the table with their $15,000 suits and decades of experience reading people saw nothing. Absolutely nothing. Because I'm Eleanor Vance, and Eleanor Vance doesn't break in public. I picked up the pen, signed my name across the bottom of the contract with a flourish that would have made a calligrapher proud, and slid the document across the table. The CFO of Goldman Sachs, a man who had probably seen every negotiation tactic ever invented, smiled and shook my hand. "Congratulations, Ms. Vance. You've just made history." "Thank you. If you'll excuse me for just a moment, I need to take an urgent call." My voice was steady, professional, gave away absolutely nothing. I walked out of that conference room at exactly the pace a confident CEO would walk. Not too fast, not too slow. I smiled at my assistant as I passed her desk. I nodded at the executives milling in the hallway. I was the picture of calm control. The second the stairwell door closed behind me, cutting me off from the cameras and the witnesses and the performance, I ran. Not walked quickly. Ran. My Louboutin heels echoing like gunshots in the empty concrete stairwell. My $2,000 Armani blazer flapping behind me as I took the stairs 2 at a time down from the 42nd floor to the 39th, where there was an empty conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking San Francisco Bay. I burst through the door, locked it behind me, and pulled out my phone with hands that were finally shaking. I had 3 more texts from Robert that had come in during the signing. "Did you get my message? This is your fault. Your mother is crying. Daniel might have to drop out of school. Hope you're happy. Don't bother calling. I'm done with you." Each word was a knife, each sentence designed to maximize damage. But underneath the rage, underneath the accusations, I could read what he really meant. He knew. Somehow Robert had figured out that the Vance Family Trust, the magical investment portfolio that had supposedly saved our family from bankruptcy, that had paid for my mother's medical treatments and my brother's MBA and the mortgage on the Palo Alto house for 5 years, wasn't his brilliant financial management at all. It was me. It had always been me, and now he knew. My fingers were ice cold as I dialed Marcus Chin, my personal financial advisor, and the only human being on this planet who knew the truth about who I really was. The phone rang once, twice. On the 3rd ring, my vision started to blur, and I realized I had forgotten to breathe. I gasped in air just as Marcus picked up. "Eleanor." His voice was cautious. He knew I was in the IPO meeting. He knew I wouldn't call unless something was catastrophically wrong. "What happened?" "Marcus." My voice came out strangled, barely above a whisper. I swallowed hard and tried again. "Did anything happen to the Vance Family Trust account? Any transfers out? Any unusual activity? Anything at all?" A pause. A long, terrible pause that made my heart hammer so hard I thought it might actually break through my ribs. "Eleanor, there's been no market volatility affecting that account whatsoever. No transfers in or out except your regular monthly distribution 3 days ago. The balance is exactly where it should be. Everything is completely stable." Another pause. "Why? What's going on?" I sank into one of the conference room chairs, my legs suddenly unable to support my weight. The phone felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. He sent me a message saying the entire trust fund is gone, that I'm screwed, that I shouldn't expect anything from him anymore. That's impossible. I'm looking at the account right now. There's $3.2 million in it. Nothing has changed. $3.2 million. Money I had earned, money I had transferred, money I had disguised as investment returns, so my father could maintain his delusion that he was a financial genius who had rebuilt the family fortune after his restaurant empire collapsed. Money he had been spending like water while telling everyone, including himself, that he was the one who had saved us all. He knows. The words came out flat, dead. He figured it out somehow, and now he's trying to punish me for it. Eleanor, I need you to focus for a second. Do you want me to maintain the confidentiality arrangement we've had for the last 5 years, or do you want to show him the truth? I looked out the window at San Francisco Bay, at the city I had conquered, at the empire I had built in absolute secrecy while pretending to be a broke freelance programmer living in a studio apartment. 5 years of my life. 5 years of lies. 5 years of watching my father take credit for my success of sending hundreds of thousands of dollars every month to keep his world afloat of hiding who I really was so he could feel like a man. 5 years of sacrifice for a family that saw me as nothing more than a convenient source of funding. A family that took and took and took and never once said thank you. A family that would apparently turn on me the second they thought the money had run out. Something inside me, something that had been bending and bending under the weight of all those years, all those lies, all that invisible labor finally snapped. Not broke, snapped. Like a rubber band that had been stretched past its breaking point and was now recoiling with enough force to take someone's eye out. "Send him everything," I said. My voice was no longer shaking. It was cold. Colder than I had ever heard it. Colder than I thought I was capable of being. Every statement from the last 5 years, every wire transfer, every transaction log, every single piece of documentation showing that I created that account, that I funded it, that every cent in it came from me and my company and my success. I want him to see exactly how much money I've given him. I want him to know the truth about who saved this family. Send it all. Send it right now. Eleanor, are you absolutely sure? Once I do this, there's no taking it back. Your cover will be blown. Your family will know who you really are. This changes everything. Good. I'm done hiding. I'm done pretending. I'm done being treated like I'm worthless by people who have been living off my money for 5 years. Send it now, Marcus, before I change my mind. I heard him typing the rapid-fire clicking of keyboard keys that meant he was pulling up files, compiling documents, preparing to drop a truth bomb that would detonate my family's entire reality. 10 seconds passed. 20, 30. It's done, Marcus said quietly. I just sent a complete financial record to Robert's email. Every wire transfer you've made to the Vance Family Trust since you created it. The account creation documents showing you as the sole owner. The transaction history showing that you've transferred $18.7 million over 5 years. Everything. He should have it in about 30 seconds. $18.7 million. I hadn't actually calculated the total before. Hearing it said out loud made something twist in my chest. That was real money. Life-changing money. World-changing money. Money I had earned through sleepless nights and brutal negotiations and taking risks that terrified me. Money I had sent home month after month after month while my family took it for granted and never once asked where it was really coming from. Thank you, Marcus. Eleanor, what are you going to do now? I stood up, straightened my blazer, checked my reflection in the window. My makeup was perfect. My hair was perfect. Nobody looking at me would ever guess that my entire world had just shifted on its axis. I looked like exactly what I was, a powerful, successful, absolutely ruthless CEO who was about to go back into that conference room and celebrate the biggest deal of her career. I'm going to finish my IPO celebration. I'm going to shake hands and accept congratulations and drink expensive champagne. And then I'm going to go home and wait for my father to call me when he sees those documents. Because he will call. And when he does, I'm going to tell him exactly what I think of him. I hung up and stood there for one more moment, letting the enormity of what I had just done wash over me. Somewhere in Palo Alto, Robert Vance was about to receive an email that would destroy every lie he had been telling for 5 years. His wife would find out. His son would find out. His friends and business associates and everyone in his social circle would eventually find out that the great Robert Vance, the financial genius who had rebuilt his fortune from nothing, had actually been living off his daughter's secret success the entire time. The daughter he had just tried to punish with a cruel text message because he thought she was dependent on him. The daughter he had dismissed as a struggling freelancer barely making ends meet. The daughter who had just signed an $8 billion IPO while he was sending her messages about how screwed she was. I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of someone who had just declared war and knew they were going to win. If you're enjoying this story of family betrayal and ultimate justice, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about people who refused to be victims. Drop a comment below telling me what you would have done in Eleanor's position. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. 3 years before that text message, I was a different person. My name is Eleanor Vance, though most people in Silicon Valley know me as Elena Vance, CEO and founder of Avalon Digital, a company that revolutionized cloud computing security. But back when I was 25 years old with a computer science degree from Stanford and a heart full of family loyalty, I was just Eleanor, the dutiful daughter who wanted nothing more than to save her family from ruin. The Vance family had a reputation in Palo Alto. My father, Robert Vance, wasn't just a restaurateur, he was a personality. He had built 5 upscale Italian restaurants from the ground up, each one a gathering place for Silicon Valley executives and old money families. He knew how to work a room, how to make people feel important, how to command attention with just his presence. At 6'3" with silver hair he started growing in his 30s, he looked like Central Casting's idea of a successful businessman. Growing up, I worshipped him. He would take me to the restaurants on weekends, introduce me to mayors and tech CEOs, teach me about wine pairings and how to read people. He told me I was smart, that I had potential, that I could do anything I wanted. But there was always a condition attached to his praise. I had to make him look good. I had to reflect well on the Vance name. I had to remember that family came first always. My mother, Maria, was the soft counterpoint to Robert's hard edges. She came from old San Francisco money, the kind that doesn't talk about wealth but shows it in understated ways. She had given up a promising career in interior design to marry Robert and raise his children. She was beautiful in that classic, timeless way with dark hair and green eyes that I inherited. But there was a fragility to her even before the lupus diagnosis. She lived to please Robert, to smooth over his rough moments, to apologize for his temper. My brother Daniel was born 3 years after me, and from the moment he arrived, he was Robert's golden child, the son, the heir, the one who would carry on the Vance legacy. Robert poured all his ambitions into Daniel, grooming him from childhood to take over the restaurant empire. Daniel absorbed it all like a sponge, learning to mimic Robert's confidence, his commanding presence, his ability to make people believe whatever he said. I learned early that my role was different. I was the smart one, the achiever, the daughter who would make the family proud through academic success. And I excelled at it. Straight A's through high school, perfect SAT scores, early admission to Stanford. Robert would show me off at dinner parties, his brilliant daughter who was going to change the world. But underneath the pride, I always sensed a certain dismissiveness. I was valuable but not essential. Not like Daniel. The cracks started showing during my sophomore year at Stanford. Robert's flagship restaurant, Ristorante Vance in downtown Palo Alto, started losing money. He blamed the economy, blamed changing tastes, blamed everything except his own management. He had always run his restaurants with an iron fist, micromanaging every detail, berating staff publicly, refusing to adapt to new trends. His head chef quit after Robert screamed at him in front of a full dining room. 2 of his best servers walked out the same week. But Robert couldn't admit he was the problem. Instead, he doubled down. He opened a 6th restaurant, an even more upscale place in Menlo Park, borrowing heavily to finance it. He told everyone it was a strategic expansion, that he was positioning the Vance brand for explosive growth. In reality, he was hemorrhaging money. Around the same time, my mother started getting sick. It began with joint pain and fatigue that she dismissed as stress. Then came the butterfly rash across her cheeks, the photosensitivity, the kidney problems. The diagnosis was systemic lupus erythematosus, a serious autoimmune disease that would require lifelong treatment and monitoring. The medical bills started immediately. I came home for winter break my junior year and found my mother crying in the kitchen. Not the quiet, dignified tears she usually shed when Robert yelled at her, but gut-wrenching sobs that shook her entire body. I held her while she told me about the insurance company refusing to cover her new medication, about the bills piling up, about Robert telling her she needed to tough it out because they couldn't afford the treatments. "He spent $15,000 on a new sound system for the Menlo Park restaurant last week," she whispered. "But he says we can't afford my medicine." That was the moment something shifted inside me. I looked at my mother, this woman who had sacrificed everything for her family, being denied basic medical care while Robert maintained his image of success. I made a decision that night, though I didn't fully understand its implications yet. I would find a way to help her, whatever it took. The summer before my senior year at Stanford, I interned at a cybersecurity startup in San Francisco. I was supposed to be doing basic coding work, but I noticed a massive vulnerability in their cloud storage security protocol. I spent 3 weeks developing a patch that not only fixed the problem, but created an entirely new approach to encryption. My supervisor was amazed. He tried to get the company to hire me full-time to buy my protocol to make me a junior partner. But the company was struggling financially. They couldn't afford to pay me what the protocol was worth. So I made another decision. I took my code, refined it further, and started my own company. I called it Avalon Digital, named after the mythical island where legends were born. I was 21 years old, still finishing my degree, and terrified out of my mind. I used my small savings and a student loan to rent a tiny office space in the Mission District. I lived on ramen and coffee, worked 18-hour days, and somehow managed to finish my degree with honors while building my first real product. It took me 6 months to get my first client, a mid-sized tech company that was desperate for better security. They paid me $75,000 for a customized version of my protocol. I immediately sent $25,000 to my mother with a note saying it was from a trust fund my grandmother had left me that had finally matured. She called me crying with relief. That money covered 3 months of her medication and treatment. Robert never asked where it came from. He just accepted it as his due, as more evidence that the Vance family had resources and connections that would always save them. But Robert's problems were getting worse. By the time I graduated from Stanford, 3 of his 6 restaurants had closed. The debts were mounting. Creditors were calling. The house in Palo Alto, the beautiful 5-bedroom Victorian that had been in Maria's family for 3 generations, was in danger of foreclosure. Daniel was starting his freshman year at Berkeley, and Robert had promised him the full college experience, including a luxury apartment and unlimited spending money. Robert called a family meeting the week after my graduation. We sat in the dining room of that beautiful house surrounded by Maria's antique furniture and Robert's awards from the restaurant industry, and he laid out the situation with the kind of spin that would make a politician proud. The restaurants were experiencing temporary setbacks due to market conditions. The trust fund that Maria's father had left them had some liquidity issues. Things were tight, but he had a plan to turn it all around. He just needed everyone to be patient and supportive. What he didn't say was that he had already raided Maria's actual inheritance, the small trust fund her father had left her to cover his business losses. What he didn't mention was that the house had been mortgaged 3 times. What he didn't admit was that Daniel's college fund was empty, spent on renovations for restaurants that were now closed. I sat there listening to him spin his lies, watching my mother nod along, even though I could see the fear in her eyes, and I realized something. Robert would never change. He would never admit failure. He would never put his family's needs above his own ego. And if I didn't do something, my mother would suffer, and Daniel would have his future destroyed before it even began. So I made the biggest decision of my life. I would save them, but I would do it on my terms in secret in a way that wouldn't give Robert any power over me or my success. I would become successful enough to fund their entire lives while pretending to be exactly what Robert expected me to be, a modestly successful tech worker who lived within her means and stayed out of the spotlight. I started Avalon Digital in earnest that fall. I brought on 2 partners, former Stanford classmates who were brilliant engineers and who trusted my vision. I told them about my family situation, about my need to maintain 2 separate identities. They thought I was crazy, but they respected the code I had written and the business plan I had developed. We split equity 3 ways and got to work. The first year was brutal. We worked out of that tiny Mission District office, taking on any client who would pay us. I lived in a studio apartment that cost $800 a month and smelled like the Indian restaurant downstairs. I drove my old Honda Civic that was held together with duct tape and hope. I wore the same 3 outfits in rotation, and every spare dollar I made went into 2 places developing our core product and sending money home disguised as investment returns. I created the Vance Family Trust that winter. It wasn't a real trust fund, just a bank account I controlled completely. But I set it up to look official with statements and documentation that appeared to show a diversified investment portfolio. I transferred $50,000 into it from Avalon Digital's first major contract, then called Robert and told him that his investments had finally started paying off, that the market had turned in his favor. The relief in his voice was palpable. He didn't ask how it happened or what had changed. He just started making plans for how to spend the money. New kitchen equipment for his remaining restaurants. A vacation for him and Maria to Napa Valley. A car upgrade from his 7-year-old Mercedes to a new BMW. Not 1 cent went toward paying down debt or securing the house. Just spending to maintain the image. But it worked. For the first time in years, Maria could afford all her medications. Her doctor was amazed at how quickly she improved once she had consistent treatment. The color came back to her face. She started gardening again, taking walks, smiling. And I knew, watching her bloom back to health, that whatever I had to sacrifice was worth it. Avalon Digital's big break came in year 2. We landed a contract with a Fortune 500 financial services company that needed to overhaul their entire cloud security infrastructure. The contract was worth $2.3 million. It was more money than I had ever imagined making. My partners wanted to celebrate, wanted to use the windfall to move to a better office, to hire more staff, to give ourselves actual salaries. I agreed to all of it except the celebration, because the same week we got that contract, I got a call from Robert. Daniel had been accepted into a prestigious MBA program at Berkeley, but the tuition was $65,000 a year. Robert expected the trust fund to cover it. I sent the money without hesitation, and another $100,000 to pay off the most pressing of Robert's business debts, and another $50,000 to cover Maria's medical expenses for the next year. My partners asked me why I was sending so much money to a family that didn't even know who I really was. I didn't have a good answer. Family loyalty guilt, the desperate need to protect my mother, the hope that somehow, if I just did enough, Robert would change. I didn't know then. I'm not sure I know even now. But I kept going. Avalon Digital grew exponentially. By year 3, we had 40 employees and an office in Soma. By year 4, we were working with half the Fortune 500 and had expanded into AI-driven threat detection. Venture capitalists started courting us. Tech journals started writing about Elena Vance, the mysterious CEO who had seemingly appeared out of nowhere with revolutionary technology. I maintained my double life with increasing difficulty. At work, I was Elena Vance, CEO, featured in Forbes and TechCrunch, speaking at conferences, closing massive deals. I wore designer suits, drove a Tesla Model S, lived in a penthouse overlooking the bay. I dated occasionally, always people who didn't know my family and wouldn't ask too many questions. I built a life that was successful and impressive and completely separate from the Vances of Palo Alto. At home with my family, I was still Eleanor, the freelance programmer. I would change clothes before visiting them, swapping my Armani for old jeans and hoodies. I drove the Honda Civic that I kept specifically for family visits. I talked about my modest projects and my small clients and my struggles to make ends meet. Robert would pat me on the head condescendingly and tell me to keep at it, that success took time, that maybe someday I would make something of myself like Daniel was going to do. Daniel. My brother was becoming a problem. The MBA program had inflated his ego to astronomical proportions. He walked around Berkeley like he owned the place, networking, aggressively name-dropping every chance he got, already planning his future as a tech CEO or venture capitalist. He started dressing like Robert, talking like Robert, treating service staff the way Robert did. He was 23 years old and already insufferable. But worse than his attitude was his financial recklessness. The $65,000 a year I was sending for tuition wasn't enough. He needed money for networking dinners, for professional clothes, for trips to conferences, for investments in his classmates' startups. He called me every few weeks with another expense, always framing it as essential for his future success. And Robert always backed him up, always pressured me to send more money from the trust fund. I should have said no. I should have set boundaries, but I didn't. I just kept sending money and telling myself it was temporary, that once Daniel graduated, he would be self-sufficient, that I just needed to hold on a little longer. The breaking point started building during what should have been my moment of greatest triumph. 4 years after founding Avalon Digital, we reached a valuation of $8 billion. Investment banks were begging us to go public. My personal net worth on paper exceeded $2 billion. I was 30 years old and one of the youngest self-made female billionaires in the country. I flew to New York for a TechCrunch conference where I was giving a keynote speech about the future of cybersecurity and artificial intelligence. It was the biggest stage I had ever been on, with thousands of people in the audience and millions watching the live stream. I wore a red dress that cost more than my first year's rent and commanded that stage like I was born to it. The speech went viral. By the time I landed back in San Francisco, my face was on the cover of Forbes magazine with the headline, "The Woman Who Made the Internet Safe." I should have been ecstatic. I should have been celebrating. Instead, I felt hollow because I couldn't share this moment with my family. I couldn't call my mother and hear her say she was proud of me. I couldn't show Daniel that his sister had achieved something real while he was still playing at Success in Business School. I couldn't throw the magazine in Robert's face and tell him that I had succeeded beyond anything he had ever accomplished. I went to dinner at the Palo Alto house the next evening, still riding the high of the Forbes cover but hiding it carefully. Robert was holding court as usual, Daniel hanging on his every word. They were talking about Daniel's latest class project, analyzing a failed tech startup and identifying what went wrong. Daniel was being condescending about the founder's mistakes, mocking the business plan, acting like he would have done so much better. I bit my tongue through dinner. I smiled and nodded and pretended to care about Robert's opinions on the restaurant industry and Daniel's theories about startup success. Maria kept glancing at me with a worried expression, like she could sense something was wrong but didn't know what. After dinner, Robert asked me about the trust fund. He wanted to know if there was enough for Daniel to do a study abroad program in London for the summer, something that would cost another $50,000. He didn't ask. He just assumed the money would be there because it always had been. Of course, I heard myself say. The trust is doing well. I can send the money next week. Robert nodded like I had just confirmed that the sun would rise tomorrow. Daniel thanked me absently, already texting his friends about London. Maria smiled gratefully, always relieved when Robert was happy, and I sat there feeling like a ghost in my own life, invisible and unappreciated. I drove back to my penthouse that night and stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows looking out at the city lights. I had built an empire. I had changed an industry. I had achieved everything I had ever dreamed of achieving, and none of it mattered to the people who were supposed to love me most. To them, I was just a wallet, a convenient source of funding for their real lives. I had a long conversation with myself that night, the kind of conversation you have at 3 in the morning when you can't sleep and can't stop your brain from circling the same questions over and over. Why was I doing this? What was I getting from this arrangement? Was I helping them, or was I enabling them? Was this love, or was it just codependency, dressed up in family loyalty? I didn't have answers, so I did what I always did. I pushed the questions aside and kept going. But something had shifted. I started paying attention to the little things, the patterns I had been ignoring for years. The way Robert never thanked me for the money, just expected it. The way Daniel talked about his future success like it was inevitable, never acknowledging that his entire lifestyle was funded by the trust that I provided. The way Maria would look at me sometimes with a mixture of gratitude and guilt that suggested she knew more than she admitted. I hired a private investigator. I told myself it was just due diligence, that as CEO of a major company, I needed to protect myself and my assets. But really, I wanted to know what Robert was doing with all the money I sent. The Vance Family Trust had received over $15 million in the 4 years since I created it. Robert's 3 remaining restaurants were still struggling. The house was still mortgaged. Where was the money going? The investigator's report came back 6 weeks later, and it was worse than I had imagined. Robert had been using money from the trust fund to invest in risky ventures with Veronica Hayes, the family lawyer. They had formed a private investment company together, using my money to buy into distressed real estate and failing businesses. Most of the investments had gone bust, losing millions. But Robert kept trying, kept gambling with money he thought was his own brilliant earnings. Worse, there were signs that some of these investments bordered on illegal. Insider trading allegations that had been quietly settled. Securities violations that Veronica had helped cover up using her legal expertise. Robert wasn't just bad at business. He was potentially a criminal. I confronted Marcus Chin with the report. Marcus had been my financial advisor since Avalon Digital's first big contract, and he had never questioned my arrangement with my family. But now, reading through the investigator's findings, he looked sick. "Eleanor, this is bad. If this gets out, if Robert gets investigated, they could trace the money back to you. You could be implicated as an accessory." "I didn't know what he was doing with the money." "That might not matter. You created a fake trust fund. You've been funneling millions to him under false pretenses. A prosecutor could make a case that you were helping him hide assets or launder money." The irony wasn't lost on me. I had been trying to save my family, and I had potentially put myself in legal jeopardy. I sat in Marcus's office staring at the investigator's report and felt the weight of 5 years of lies pressing down on me. What should I do? Marcus was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Stop sending money immediately. Document everything you've sent so far and your lack of knowledge about what he was doing with it. Distance yourself legally from Robert's activities and prepare for the possibility that this is all going to come out." I left his office and went home and did something I hadn't done since I was a child. I cried. Not elegant, quiet tears, but ugly, gasping sobs that left me exhausted and empty. I had sacrificed 5 years of my life to protect people who didn't value me. I had built an empire in secret to fund a family that took me for granted. I had put my own future at risk for people who would probably throw me under the bus if things went wrong. The next morning, I woke up angry. Not the hot, explosive anger that burns out quickly. The cold, calculating anger that hardens into determination. I was done being used. I was done hiding. I was done sacrificing myself for people who saw me as nothing more than a resource to exploit. But I didn't know yet what I was going to do about it. I went to work, ran my meetings, closed my deals, and pretended everything was fine. I stopped sending money to the trust fund without explanation, just let the transfer stop. I waited to see what would happen. Robert called 3 weeks later. His tone was casual at first, asking how I was doing, making small talk about Daniel's classes. Then he got to the point. The trust fund distributions had stopped. Was there a problem? Had something happened with the investments? "No," I said carefully. "I'm just reevaluating some things. The market's been volatile." "Well, I need you to send the next distribution immediately. I have some investments that require funding, time-sensitive opportunities." "What kind of investments?" "That's not your concern. The trust is managed by the family, and I'm the head of this family. Just send the money." Something snapped. Maybe it was his tone so arrogant and entitled. Maybe it was knowing what he was really doing with the money. Maybe it was just 5 years of resentment finally breaking through. Whatever it was, I said something I hadn't planned to say. "There is no trust fund, Dad. There never was. It's just my money. Money I earned building Avalon Digital while pretending to be a broke freelancer. Every cent you've spent for the last 5 years came from me." Silence. Long, heavy silence. "Then you're lying." "I'm not. Check your bank statements. Look at the account origin. It's all me. I created the Vance Family Trust to save this family after you bankrupted it, and you've been taking credit for my success ever since." He hung up on me. I sat there with the phone in my hand, adrenaline flooding my system, equal parts terrified and exhilarated. I had done it. I had told him the truth. There was no going back now. My phone exploded 20 minutes later. Calls from Robert, from Maria, from Daniel. Texts demanding explanations, hurling accusations expressing shock and confusion. I ignored them all. I called Marcus instead. "Send Robert the full documentation. Every wire transfer, every statement, every piece of paper showing that I created and funded that account. Send it all, now." Marcus hesitated. "Eleanor, are you sure? Once you do this, there's no taking it back." "I'm sure, send it." The next few hours were chaos. Robert called 17 times. He left voicemails that started angry and became increasingly desperate. He sent texts that swung between demanding I explain myself and ordering me to stop this nonsense immediately. Daniel called crying, panicking about his tuition and his London program. Maria sent a message saying she was confused and scared and asking me to please call her. I didn't respond to any of them. I sat in my office at Avalon Digital, the office with my name on the door and my face on the wall, and I let them panic. For 5 years, I had immediately responded to every request, every demand, every crisis. For 5 years, I had put their needs above my own. Not anymore. Robert finally got through to me that evening. I was at home in my penthouse drinking wine and looking out at the city when my phone rang for the 30th time. I answered, putting him on speaker. "What the hell do you think you're playing at?" His voice was shaking with rage. "These fake documents you sent, these elaborate lies, this whole charade. You're trying to embarrass me. You're trying to make yourself look important. You're trying to steal credit for my financial success." I laughed. Actually laughed. "Your financial success? Dad, you're bankrupt. You've been bankrupt for 5 years. I'm the only reason you still have a house. I'm the only reason Mom has her medication. I'm the only reason Daniel is in graduate school. Me, not you. You haven't earned $1 of your own in half a decade. You're a liar. You're a freelance programmer who makes maybe $50,000 a year. There's no way you have the kind of money those statements claim." Google me. Elena Vance, CEO of Avalon Digital. Look at the Forbes article from last month. Look at the TechCrunch coverage. Look at the fact that my company is valued at $8 billion. That's who I really am. That's who I've been for 5 years while you took credit for my money and called me a failure at family dinners. More silence. Then I heard him typing, his breathing getting heavier. He was looking me up. He was seeing the articles, the pictures, the proof that everything I said was true. When he spoke again, his voice was different. Still angry, but underlaid with something else. Fear. "Why would you lie to us? Why would you hide this? Because you never would have accepted help from me. Because your ego couldn't handle your daughter being more successful than you. Because I knew you would try to control me to take credit to make my success about you somehow. And I was right, wasn't I?" Even now, finding out the truth, your first instinct isn't gratitude or pride. It's anger that I didn't let you control the narrative. "I'm your father. You should have told me. You should have trusted me." With what? With the money you've been gambling away on illegal investments with Veronica Hayes, with the money you've been using to maintain your image while Mom went without medication. You want to talk about trust. You've betrayed this family's trust for years. His breath caught. "What are you talking about?" "I know about your investment scheme with Veronica. I know about the securities violations. I know about the insider trading. I hired an investigator, Dad. I have documentation of everything. And I know that you've been using my money to fund potentially illegal activities." "You're bluffing." "Try me." He hung up again. I poured myself another glass of wine and waited. I didn't have to wait long. Within an hour, I received a legal letter via email from Veronica Hayes' firm. They were demanding that I immediately cease and desist from making defamatory claims about Robert Vance. They were threatening to sue me for fraud in the creation of the Vance Family Trust. They were demanding that I transfer full ownership of the trust and all associated assets to Robert as the legitimate head of the family. I read the letter twice and then I started laughing. Not bitter laughter, but genuine amusement. They had just made the biggest mistake of their lives. By putting their demands in writing, by making legal threats, they had given me the opening I needed to fight back publicly and without mercy. I forwarded the letter to my own lawyers, a team of extremely expensive and extremely aggressive attorneys who had been itching for a fight. Within 3 hours, they had drafted a response that was basically a legal declaration of war. We weren't just rejecting their demands. We were threatening to expose Robert's illegal activities, to sue Veronica for malpractice and potential disbarment, and to make public every shady deal they had done together. But I wasn't done. I called an emergency meeting with my PR team at Avalon Digital. We had been planning the company's IPO announcement for months, trying to find the perfect timing and messaging. I had just found it. "Move up the IPO announcement to this week. I want a full press conference, and I want to tell my story." My PR director looked nervous. "Your story, Eleanor, are you sure this is deeply personal?" "That's exactly why it will work. Everyone loves an underdog story. Everyone loves a story about family betrayal and triumph over adversity. We announce the IPO, we announce my real identity, and we frame it in the context of overcoming obstacles, including exploitation by family members. We don't name names initially, but we make sure everyone knows there's a story there. This could backfire spectacularly, or it could make me the most sympathetic figure in Silicon Valley. Either way, I'm done hiding. The press conference was scheduled for Friday morning, 3 days away. In those 3 days, all hell broke loose. Robert and Daniel showed up at Salesforce Tower trying to confront me. My security team had been briefed and turned them away, but not before Daniel made a scene in the lobby, shouting about family betrayal and recording everything on his phone for social media. That video went semi-viral in tech circles. People started speculating about what was happening with Elena Vance. Industry journalists started digging into my background. Someone found out that I had family in Palo Alto named Vance. The connections were being made, and the story was spiraling beyond my control. Good, let it spiral. Let everyone see what Robert really was. Maria called me Wednesday evening. Not on my cell phone, which I had been ignoring, but on my office line, which she shouldn't have even known. Her voice was small and frightened. "Eleanor, please. I don't understand what's happening. Robert is talking about lawyers and betrayal and money. Daniel is having panic attacks about his tuition. I'm so confused and scared. Please come home and explain this to me." Home. She still called that house home, even though it represented everything wrong with our family. But her voice broke something in me, some last remnant of the daughter who just wanted to protect her mother. "I'll come by tomorrow evening, alone, just you and me." I drove the Tesla this time. No more hiding, no more pretending. I pulled up to the Palo Alto house in my expensive car, wearing my expensive clothes, looking like exactly who I was, a billionaire CEO who had built an empire from nothing. Maria opened the door before I could knock. She looked smaller somehow, more fragile. The lupus was under control thanks to the medication I had been paying for, but the stress of the last few days had taken its toll. She stared at me for a long moment, taking in the designer outfit, the confidence in my posture, the transformation from Eleanor to Elena. "Oh," she said softly, "it's true. It's true." We sat in the living room, the same room where I had attended countless family meetings and holiday dinners and lectures from Robert about responsibility and duty. Maria made tea with shaking hands and sat across from me, looking like she might shatter at any moment. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked. "Because you would have told Robert, and Robert would have ruined everything. He would have tried to take control of my company or take credit for my success or use me as a pawn in his image management. I couldn't let that happen. I would have been proud of you. I am proud of you. Are you, or are you angry that I lied?" She was quiet for a long time, sipping her tea, staring into the past. Then she said, "I'm angry at myself. I knew something was wrong. I knew Robert's story about the trust fund didn't make sense. I knew the money was coming from somewhere he wasn't talking about, but I didn't ask questions because I was afraid of the answers. I needed the medication. I needed to feel safe, so I chose to believe his lies." "Mom, you didn't have a choice. You were sick." "I always had a choice. I chose to stay with him even when he was cruel. I chose to defend him even when he was wrong. I chose to prioritize my own comfort over protecting my children. Daniel has become a copy of Robert because I never showed him there was another way. And you, my brilliant, strong daughter, you had to hide who you were because I couldn't stand up to my husband." She started crying, then quiet tears that ran down her face like rain on a window. I moved to sit beside her and held her while she cried 5 years' worth of suppressed guilt and regret. "I want a divorce," she whispered into my shoulder. "I should have left him years ago, but I was scared. Scared of being alone, scared of being sick without support, scared of disappointing you and Daniel. But I can't do this anymore. I can't pretend that his behavior is acceptable. I can't watch him destroy you and feel like it's my fault for not stopping him." "It's not your fault, Mom. He's responsible for his own choices. But I enabled those choices and I need to stop." We talked for 3 more hours. I told her everything. About building Avalon Digital, about the double life, about the PI's report, revealing Robert's shady investments. I told her about the press conference planned for Friday, about my decision to go public with my story. I told her she could stay with me, that I would support her through the divorce, that she would never have to worry about money or medical care again. She held my hand and cried and apologized over and over. And slowly, I felt something healing between us. Not completely. There was too much damage for that. But it was a start. I left the house at midnight. Robert's BMW was in the driveway. He had been home the whole time, probably listening from his office, too proud to face me directly. Daniel's car was there too. They were probably strategizing, figuring out how to spin this, how to maintain control. They didn't know what was coming. Friday morning arrived sunny and clear, one of those perfect San Francisco days that make you remember why people pay obscene amounts of money to live here. The press conference was scheduled for 10 a.m. at Avalon Digital headquarters. Every major tech journalist in the Bay Area had RSVP'd. Word had leaked that this was going to be a major announcement, and speculation was rampant. I stood backstage wearing a navy blue power suit that cost more than my first year's rent and felt strangely calm. My PR team was running around making last-minute adjustments. My partners were reviewing talking points. My lawyers were standing by in case anything went wrong. Marcus Chin gave me a thumbs up from the front row. I walked onto that stage and looked out at the cameras and the journalists and the curious tech workers who had gathered to watch, and I told the truth. All of it. I announced Avalon Digital's IPO at a valuation of $8.2 billion. I told the story of building the company from nothing while supporting my family through hard times. I talked about the double life I had maintained for 5 years, about being Eleanor, the struggling programmer to my family, while being Elena, the billionaire CEO to the world. I mentioned, without naming names initially, that certain family members had tried to take credit for my success and were now attempting to discredit me and claim ownership of my assets. The room was dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Then the questions started. Can you tell us more about the family members who tried to take credit? Are you referring to your father, Robert Vance, and his business activities? Is it true that you've been supporting your entire family while they didn't know your real identity? I answered carefully, strategically. I didn't lie, but I didn't attack directly either. I framed everything in terms of complicated family dynamics, the struggle to help while maintaining boundaries, the pain of not being recognized for who I really was. I was sympathetic, vulnerable, strong. I was everything a good PR story required. The media ate it up. Within hours, the story was everywhere. Tech blogs, business journals, major newspapers. The narrative wrote itself. Brilliant young woman builds empire in secret to save ungrateful family. Family attempts to steal credit and assets when truth emerges. I was either a hero or a manipulative liar, depending on who was writing the story, but either way, I was famous. The investigative journalists got to work immediately. They dug into Robert's background, finding the failed restaurants, the bankruptcies, the suspicious business dealings with Veronica Hayes. They found the foreclosure notices, the lawsuits from former employees, the pattern of financial mismanagement. They found Daniel's social media presence, his expensive lifestyle, his posts about networking dinners and luxury apartments, all funded by money he claimed was from family investments. The picture that emerged was devastating. Robert looked like exactly what he was, a failed businessman who had been living off his daughter's secret success while taking credit for her money. Daniel looked like a spoiled rich kid who had never earned anything in his life. Even Maria came under scrutiny, with some journalists questioning why she had stayed with Robert and allowed the situation to continue. Robert's response was to attack. He and Veronica held their own press conference 2 days later, claiming that I had defrauded the family, that the money I claimed to have earned was actually embezzled from Robert's business accounts, that I was a liar and a thief who was trying to destroy my own father. It was desperate and ridiculous and completely unsupported by evidence, but Robert sold it with all the confidence he had used to sell his restaurant empire's success story. The problem was that nobody believed him. The evidence was too clear, too well documented. Marcus Chin had made sure of that. Every wire transfer, every company record, every piece of financial documentation showed that I had built Avalon Digital independently and had voluntarily sent money to my family. There was no embezzlement, no theft, just a daughter who had sacrificed too much for people who didn't appreciate her. The legal investigations started immediately. The SEC got interested in Robert's investment activities with Veronica Hayes. The California State Bar opened an ethics investigation into Veronica's conduct. former business associates of Robert's started coming forward with stories of his mismanagement and questionable dealings. It all happened so fast. One week, Robert was threatening to sue me. The next week, he was being served with subpoenas and scrambling to find a lawyer who would defend him. Veronica was placed on administrative leave from her firm. Daniel's MBA program at Berkeley started receiving complaints about his behavior and questions about how he was funded. And me, I watched it all unfold from my office in Salesforce Tower, running my company, closing deals, living my actual life for the first time in 5 years. I should have felt guilty. I should have felt bad about destroying my father's reputation. But I didn't. I felt free. The confrontation I had been both dreading and anticipating happened 3 weeks after the press conference. Robert showed up at my office building again, but this time he made it past security because Maria was with him. Or rather, Maria was leaving him and wanted to see me, and Robert followed her. Security called me. "Your mother is in the lobby. Your father is with her, but she says she's here to see you alone. What do you want us to do? Send my mother up. Keep my father in the lobby. He's insisting on coming up too. Then call the police if he tries. I have a restraining order being filed this afternoon. Consider this his warning." 5 minutes later, Maria stepped out of the elevator onto the executive floor. She looked around at the modern decor, the bustling assistants, the view of the city from floor-to-ceiling windows. This was my world, the world I had hidden from her for 5 years. "It's beautiful," she said softly. "It's home, more home than that house in Palo Alto ever was." "Eleanor, I came to tell you that I'm leaving him. I filed for divorce this morning. I'm moving out today." "Good. Where will you go?" "I was hoping I could stay with you for a while, just until I find my own place. I don't want to take advantage, but I don't have anywhere else." "Mom, you can stay with me as long as you want. I have plenty of space, and you're not taking advantage. You're finally putting yourself first." She hugged me, then really hugged me, holding on like I was the only solid thing in a world that was falling apart. We stood there in the middle of my office while my staff pretended not to notice, and something that had been broken between us started to heal. Downstairs, Robert was causing the scene I had expected. He was demanding to see me, threatening to sue the building's security, making accusations about kidnapping and elder abuse. The police arrived and escorted him out. The whole incident was caught on the building's security cameras, and of course it leaked to the media. More evidence that Robert Vance was unstable, controlling, abusive. The final confrontation happened a month later after the evidence had been compiled, after the investigators had done their work, after the full scope of Robert's activities with Veronica Hayes had been exposed. They were both facing criminal charges: securities fraud, falsifying investment documents, possibly money laundering. Robert's remaining assets had been frozen. The house in Palo Alto was in foreclosure proceedings. Everything was falling apart. Robert called me from Veronica's office, where they were apparently strategizing their legal defense. He was trying a different tactic now: appeal to family loyalty claim, that I was destroying the family, beg for my help. His voice sounded older, defeated. "Eleanor, you have to help us. These charges are ridiculous. We didn't do anything illegal. We were just trying to invest wisely to grow the family wealth." "What family wealth, Dad? There was never any family wealth. Just my money that you stole and gambled away." "Don't be dramatic. We borrowed from the trust temporarily. We would have paid it back once our investments paid off." "Your investments never paid off. They failed spectacularly, costing millions of dollars. My millions of dollars. And now you're facing criminal charges because you didn't just lose money, you broke the law doing it. So that's it. You're just going to let your own father go to prison. You're going to let yourself go to prison. You made these choices. You committed these crimes. I didn't force you to do any of it." Veronica grabbed the phone from him. "Eleanor, be reasonable. If you testify that you gave Robert permission to invest the trust funds, if you say you were aware of the investments and approved them, we can make this all go away. You're a successful businesswoman. Your word carries weight. You want me to lie under oath to protect my father and his accomplice? Are you actually insane? I'm trying to help your family. You're trying to save yourself, and the answer is no. I'm not committing perjury for either of you. You're on your own." I hung up on them. It was the last time Robert ever called me. He and Veronica were indicted 6 weeks later. The trial lasted 3 months and was a circus. The evidence was overwhelming. They were both convicted. Robert got 18 months in federal prison. Veronica got 3 years and was disbarred. Daniel's story was different. He wasn't charged with anything, but his reputation was destroyed. His classmates at Berkeley shunned him. The study abroad program in London was cancelled. He was asked to leave the MBA program, not officially expelled, but strongly encouraged to withdraw. The lifestyle he had built, the image he had cultivated, all of it collapsed overnight. He showed up at Avalon Digital 6 months after Robert was sentenced. He looked nothing like the confident, cocky young man who had recorded me being harassed in the lobby. He was thinner, wearing cheap clothes, working part-time at a coffee shop to pay his bills. He had moved out of his luxury apartment into a studio in Oakland. He looked broken. My assistant told me he was in the lobby asking to see me. I almost said no, but something made me go down there myself. We stood facing each other in that same lobby where he had tried to destroy me with his phone camera. Neither of us spoke for a long moment. Then Daniel said, "I'm sorry. For everything. For being just like him. For taking your money without appreciating it. For believing his lies instead of seeing who you really were. I'm sorry." Why now? Why apologize now after everything that's happened? Because I have nothing left to lose. No image to protect, no reputation to maintain, no future that depends on playing a role. I'm just Daniel Vance, college dropout, working at a coffee shop trying to figure out who I am when I'm not trying to be dad. And who is that? I don't know yet. That's why I'm here. I'm not asking for money. I'm not asking for a job. I just wanted you to know that I see what you did for us for me. And I'm sorry I never saw it before. I looked at my brother, really looked at him, and saw something I hadn't expected. Genuine remorse, real self-awareness, the beginning of actual growth. He wasn't Robert. He had been shaped by Robert, poisoned by Robert's worldview, but he wasn't irredeemably damaged. There's an entry-level position open in customer service. It pays $18 an hour. You'd be answering support tickets and handling basic customer complaints. It's not glamorous. It's not going to make you rich or important, but it's honest work, and if you put in the effort, there's room to advance. His eyes widened. You're offering me a job? I'm offering you a chance. What you do with it is up to you. He took the job. Started at the very bottom, working alongside recent college graduates and career changers, learning humility for the first time in his life. It took him 2 years to get promoted to a team lead position, another year after that to move into a management role. He earned every step. He proved himself. And slowly we rebuilt a relationship based on mutual respect rather than family obligation. Maria thrived after leaving Robert. She moved into a beautiful condo overlooking the Pacific Ocean that I helped her buy. She reconnected with old friends that Robert had driven away. She started painting again, something she had loved in her youth but had given up when she married. She became involved in lupus advocacy and support groups. She transformed from the frightened, diminished woman I had known growing up into someone confident and whole. She and I had dinner together every week. We talked about art and politics and life. We talked about the past sometimes, but mostly we focused on building a new relationship, a healthy one, not based on sacrifice or obligation. She apologized often, especially in the first year, for not protecting me better. I eventually learned to accept her apologies and let go of the resentment. As for Avalon Digital, the IPO was a massive success. We raised $3 billion and our stock price tripled in the first year. I became a fixture in the tech world, a symbol of both innovation and resilience. I used my platform to advocate for other people trapped in abusive family dynamics, to talk openly about financial exploitation and emotional manipulation. My story resonated with thousands of people who saw their own experiences reflected in mine. Robert served his full sentence. He was released from federal prison 2 years ago and moved to Nevada, where he works in restaurant management at a casino. We don't speak. I have nothing to say to him, and I suspect he has nothing to say to me that I would want to hear. He's alive, he's employed, he's surviving. That's all I need to know. I learned something important through all of this. Family isn't about blood or obligation. It's about respect and reciprocity and genuine care. The family I have now, the one I've chosen and built, looks nothing like the one I was born into. It includes Maria and Daniel. Yes, but also my business partners, my mentors, my friends, people who value me for who I am rather than what I can provide. And I learned that there's a difference between sacrifice and self-destruction. Sacrifice is choosing to give something up for a greater good. Self-destruction is giving pieces of yourself away until there's nothing left, For 5 years, I was destroying myself while calling it love. It took me far too long to understand the difference. The question I want to leave you with is this: are you living your truth or someone else's version of you? Are you sacrificing yourself for people who would never do the same for you? And if you are, what would it take for you to stop? Think about it. And if this story resonated with you, if you've experienced anything similar, or know someone who has, let me know in the comments below. Share your story. Let's start a conversation about breaking free from toxic family dynamics and building lives we actually want to live. Hit that like button if you believe everyone deserves to be valued for who they are, not what they can provide. Subscribe for more stories about people who refused to stay victims and instead became victorious. Your support means everything, and I'll see you in the next story.